Hey everybody, you're listening to another episode of the Paradigm Shift Podcast. This episode's going to be a little bit different than most of you have heard. You're probably used to hearing about 15 to 18 minute episodes. We're not sure how long this episode's going to go, so it's going to be posted a little bit differently. It's going to come with a blog post with a bit more notes and discussion on it probably. So a little bit different today, but we're pretty excited about it. So we're going to be talking about Christian masculinity and really how it relates to the world today and how it's impacting the world today. So with me here is my good friend Stuart Luck. So Stuart, why don't you tell us a little about yourself real quick, man?
What's up, y'all? So we're going to dig a little bit deeper into the masculine soul with this, like Alex was saying. So it'll be worth it. It'll be good. There'll probably be some challenging stuff in here. So
Absolutely.
It'll be worth the time if you choose to spend it. But my name is Stuart Luck. I've been saved for probably 7 or 8 years now. I don't know. I am currently a mechanical engineering student over at UNF. Done a lot of ministry leadership opportunities, things like that. I led an outreach for 3 years in the inner city for children. I've led security teams at churches. I've led all kinds of cool stuff, and definitely have a heart for men's ministry and kind of building men up in those environments.
That's awesome, man. In a second, I want to hear a little bit more about your background, your testimony. But real quick, for anybody who's listening, I do feel that this episode will have a different audience than we're probably used to. So a little bit about myself. My name is Alex Sanfilippo, and I'm the regular host of the Paradigm Shift Podcast. And I primarily, a lot of people think that dailyps.com is my full-time job. That's actually all volunteer work. That's my ministry. I love doing that, love helping people. Primarily, though, I work in corporate America. I work in the aerospace industry. Corporate America is a good time. I work as a director in my company. I'm actually the youngest senior leader, and I'm just there to help make the company grow. I work on its profitability, all that type of thing. So, and then I love to serve at my church. That's something that I absolutely am just passionate about, is just helping lead people to Jesus. So that's a little bit about me as well. But Stuart, let's get back to you real quick, because you have a really cool testimony that I think is actually going to really resonate with a lot of people that are listening today. So tell us a little bit more about you, and I'm going to ask you tons of questions because I want you to share all of it. So,
yeah, not natural for me.
Right.
So yeah, I thought you were going to do sponsorships in the beginning there. You have a very professional podcasting voice.
Yeah. No sponsorships today.
This is sponsored by Testosterone. RX.
Yeah, right. Are they going to pay us?
They should.
I don't know if they will.
You can support PS with this.
Okay. You know what? I'll contact them later.
All right.
Hey, this might be sponsored by somebody.
Yeah.
All right, go ahead.
So yeah, as a kid growing up, I had a tumultuous childhood. My parents got divorced pretty early on. My dad kind of checked out after the divorce, which ultimately led to, as a teenager, me weighing about 425 pounds. And then I ended up dropping out of high school, actually. So kind of most people would say at that point, wouldn't achieve much in my life, you know. Which, for those of you that don't know, like, now I'm much thinner. We will get into that because you can't see me. Hopefully you can't see me in SA.
Oh my gosh.
I turned 18. I ended up getting saved, and I ended up losing like 200 pounds.
It's amazing.
But during that whole time, I tore ligaments in 2 of my knees. I had 2 knee surgeries. A bunch of bad stuff happened there. I went back online, got my degree online, my high school diploma, and then started going to school. So currently I'm 6 classes away from graduating with a mechanical engineering degree. It's been a long and arduous trip with that, because they don't even have a category for people who have dropped out of high school and are graduating with engineering degrees. It just doesn't happen.
Right.
So God's really brought me through a lot with that, and most of these guys are your mathletes and all-stars and all of that. It's probably the most difficult program that the University of North Florida offers in terms of like your students' IQ levels and then the amount of work.
Oh, I agree with that, yeah.
And then, physically, I'm getting prepared right now for a future career in military or law enforcement. And, you wouldn't guess a guy that used to be a land whale, for lack of a better term, could go do that. But it is what it is. And I actually just got back 2 weeks ago from hiking 30 miles on the Appalachian Trail. And the significance of that for me is the doctor told me when I was having my knee surgeries that by the age of 27, which I just turned, I wouldn't be able to make it up a flight of stairs without having a lot of knee pain.
Oh, wow.
So I just did 30 miles on the Appalachian Trail, which is, for those that don't know, known as one of the most rigorous mountain hiking trails that you can do. We were summiting like 3 or 4 mountains a day out there. That's great, dude. So we're just going up and down, and and it's from the Lord that I didn't have much knee pain while I was out there. I mean, it's just kind of an incredible thing, really.
Yeah, that's so cool, man. So going back to like earlier in your testimony that you're mentioning, when did Jesus come into play, like throughout this journey?
Yeah, so I started exercising actually, but I hadn't really like lost any weight or anything. But around the age of 18 or 19, I was kind of an atheist, and the Lord started working on my heart a little bit. I actually prayed, and I was like, God, if you're real, can you give me an orange? And I was like, all right, at the end of this weekend,
what does that mean, give you an orange? What does that mean?
It was just like, hey, God, prove to me that you're real.
Like an orange that you would eat? What do you mean?
Well, that's what I was thinking.
Okay,
yeah.
All right.
But as we know, God doesn't really work in the way we like to think.
Yeah, okay. Sorry, continue.
So by the end of that weekend, I still hadn't gotten an orange, but I sit down and watch a TV show. It's not a Christian show, so I won't say the name of it. But the focal point of that TV episode were oranges. Like, they spent probably a solid 15 minutes with a guy like juicing an orange that night. So it was just a really, really weird thing, and that's kind of what opened my heart to it. And I went to church with a good friend of Alex and I's later on, and I ended up getting saved there. And then kind of everything just started piecing itself together.
That's awesome, dude. Mm-hmm. That's really cool, man. And you mentioned that you were doing an outreach for a while, which I'm very familiar with, but can you share a little bit about that as well, what you were doing?
Yeah, so shortly after I got saved, I was 19 years old, and I went to this outreach down in the Cleveland Arms Apartments. It's known in Jacksonville as the worst apartment complex. It actually has the highest murder rate, or it did until they put a bunch of law enforcement down there every night. Right. I was down there for a Thanksgiving outreach, and God just put it on my heart to start an outreach down there. So I got in contact with another mutual friend of ours who was starting up outreaches for our church celebration. And he's like, hey, yeah, I wanted to start an outreach down there. I was praying about finding a leader. I was like, cool, I'm your guy. So I met with the guy there's a guy who runs a program adjacent to Cleveland Arms, and they do a lot of kids ministry. He did an after-school program, and he's like, hey, yeah, I've been looking for somebody to come in on Saturdays so we can bring these kids off the streets and get them here on Saturdays as well. And the significance there being, he wants to get these kids out of their home environment and into a Christian environment. Yeah. So we went out there. I had no idea what I was doing. I had no experience leading anything at all, but I just knew that God put it on my heart. So I went out there, and I think our first outreach, we had like 15 volunteers and 50 kids show up. So it was kind of a trial by fire for me. Yeah, no kidding. But things went really well, and we preached the gospel out there for like 2.5 years, and now, as it's turned out, so fast forward all these years, it's probably been 7 years now that there's been constant ministry to these children. We've got an entire generation of kids that have been ministered to and have grown up outside of the influence of the hood, and it's actually now Celebration's outreach. It's their mission or outreach hub for all of Northeast Florida. Yeah,
Northeast Dream Centers, they call it, I believe. It's huge. It's unbelievable what happens there now. Yeah, and that was because you were obedient at 19 years old or something. Like it's amazing to see. And as you know, Stuart, I went out there quite a bit as well. Yeah. And it was an amazing opportunity to pour into the lives of some of these people that never had the opportunity to hear anything about Jesus. Yeah, most of them never left that apartment complex. Yeah. Like that's where they were. If they were, it was either there or school. If they were even in school, a lot of them, and it was so cool to have that sort of influence on them. So
in Jacksonville, going to the beach is a big deal for those of you who may not be here, and most of the kids had never been to the beach. Yeah, sad, like we took them to the beach one time, and it was just a huge dream for them to go to the beach. Yeah, which is probably 30 minutes away from where they were.
Right. Man, we could talk about this topic another time. I like the idea of serving and doing outreach, but anyway, we got to move on because we get stuck there. But I just wanted everyone to hear a little bit more about Stuart and what he's done for the kingdom and just his testimony. I think it's amazing, dude. Like where you've come from is so cool. So, all right. So here's what we're gonna talk about. We're gonna start off with talking about the mindset of masculinity. Now, before we start, I want to say this. Stuart and I decided at first, hey, let's just make this a regular daily PS. A regular podcast, a normal 15 to 18 minute range. We're both like, all right, sounds great. We went through 15 minutes, felt like half a minute, 45 seconds is what it felt like. I'm like, all right, we didn't finish the introduction. Let's just make it 2 episodes. we did another episode and it didn't go anywhere either. I was like, all right, I think we need more time. This is going to have to be different.
Well, it went places. It was just there was a lot in there.
Yeah, we would have filled up a year of the Paradigm Shift podcast on just this one thing. So I was like, you know what, we got to do this differently. So we decided to change it up. But this is a topic we're both very passionate about, and we both notice that there is a need to talk about it right now, more so than I think ever. I'm just noticing a lack of masculinity, not just in Christianity, but also in general, especially the United States. Men in general are less masculine than they've ever been. Yeah. And we'll get into more of that while we're talking about it. Now, a quick disclaimer, we're not going to be politically correct necessarily, so no offense here. We're probably going to delete the comments on this thing so that people can't get angry. But we're not here to offend anybody. We're just here to kind of give a different mindset, and our goal is not to offend or upset anybody. If it happens in today's world, you can't help but offend. If you sneeze in the wrong place, someone's going to get offended. So really, we're just sharing what we believe God's put in our hearts to share. And we think, especially for Christian men, it's important for us to really be to head up what manhood should look like being a man should look like.
And I want to point out as well, we're going to do this in a spirit of love,
absolutely,
and maybe even correction for some people. I want to point out that if you do feel offended, that's not a bad thing. Offense is like a very bad thing these days, but if you feel offended, I would encourage you to maybe go down and look into your own heart and say, why am I offended about this? Am I offended because I feel insecure about something, or I feel I've got a past wound from something, or a wound in my childhood, and this is kind of striking to that. So I would encourage anyone who does feel offended by this to maybe ask yourself some questions, and then that might even lead to freedom for you.
Yeah.
I think it's a good thing to do that every now and then.
No, I agree. And one other thing before we just jump into this here, but if you're a female, a woman, you're listening to this, don't feel like you have to cut it off. This is not only for men. It's actually, I think, really important for women to listen to as well, because understanding the definition of masculinity and manhood is important for women as well, because we're different than women. Yeah. And that's a good thing, a really good thing. So I think this is an important thing for you here as well, because I'll be real, man. Women help men be manly. Yeah. If they're acting the right way, and we'll get into that. But let's just.
Well, the Bible says, what is that verse? A good wife is like a crown to her husband's head.
Yeah.
Or something like that.
Absolutely. I think
it's
that was
big deal
in Proverbs, right? Or in Psalms or Proverbs. Yeah. It's like a book of wisdom that it's a big deal. Yeah. Now, I'll be real. Shout out to my wife real quick. I'm better at being a man since I married her than I was before. Yeah. She's helped me in so many ways. She's given me the opportunity to lead, and almost expected it even. Yeah. And it's caused me to just to develop and grow as a man like I honestly never thought I would, which is so cool. So this podcast episode is for everybody.
Yeah.
So
we'll add some stuff in here too as well, like tips, and maybe talk about some things that you learned in your marriage for women who want to maybe encourage their men a little bit.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. So let's get into the mindset, man. Why don't you that was like kind of the big thing that you wanted to talk about. Let's go ahead and just jump into that.
Yeah, so, these days, I want to preface this in saying that these days, the mindset of masculinity is a very rare thing. We have, maybe we have a lot of guys that are walking around and have a very defeated mentality, and they have a very passive mentality towards life. And if you look scripturally, just as well as self-evident truths, these are destructive mentalities, and men are not called to be this way. Yeah. But in a lot of ways, men can be so beat down because of society and some other influences that they kind of adopt this defeated mentality before they even get started. But you look at the Bible, and you even look at Jesus, who kind of sets the masculine standard. Men are called to be really a handful of traits. I feel like we're called to be aggressive in certain ways. Now, we're not called to be jerks in our aggressiveness, but we're called to be aggressive. We go after what we want, and we take it by force. The kingdom of heaven suffers violence, and the violent take it by force. We're called to be strong and unwavering in our principles and in our morals and in our convictions. Mm-hmm. You look at Jesus, and he did not back down. He was being tortured. He said, I'm here for a mission. I'm going to be strong in my morals and my convictions. Yeah. We're called to speak the truth in love. Jesus, with the woman at the well, spoke the truth to her about being a prostitute, and then actually told her, hey, but I can forgive your sins. But it kind of, he spoke the truth to her, and then that kind of broke her down a little bit, and she humbled herself in that moment and realized that she needed a savior. Yeah. So lovingly speaking the truth. And then also just kind of having, I guess this would go into aggressiveness, but having a can-do mindset about things. And, in the podcast that you guys won't hear, Alex talked about being a business leader and kind of going out and making moves a little bit and actually taking risks and, you know, going after positions and things like that. So I'd say the fifth principle I just touched on is men have to be willing to take risks.
Yeah.
We are quintessentially called to be the ones who take the risks in the world. Sometimes we're called to actually sacrifice ourselves and martyr ourselves as Jesus was.
Right.
You know, we're called to be soldiers, and we might have to go fight a war and actually sacrifice our lives in that war for a greater good. Or in a business arena to start a business that, you know, is going to put you financially in a shaky spot for a few years, but then, you know, maybe God blows it up in the future and then uses it to fund 100 missions trips or whatever. You know?
Right.
So I'd say that's what I would say the mindset of masculinity is.
Yeah.
Those 5 principles.
So, and I hear you. Those principles are all things I agree with. That's not where it is today, though.
Yeah.
If you ask the average person, like, what does it mean to be masculine? Like, what's the mindset it takes? Most people wouldn't even know where to go with that. They wouldn't even understand how to answer it.
Yeah.
I think that's really, honestly, part of the problem with where we are in the world today. Especially, again, United States, like I'm going to use that, I call it the world, but United States, for me, that's where I'm at and that's where I see it, that a lot of times we've just lost this mindset of what masculinity is. Mm-hmm. And we almost look to society to see what it should be. And it's something that's getting attacked right now. Mm-hmm. At a psychological level, that's where it's getting attacked right now. So we really don't have these things. But like, before we jump too far ahead, like what do you think are some ways that we can start developing this mindset, growing this mindset, and operating in it more? Do you have any ideas or feedback?
Yeah. So first of all, it is a mindset. Being a man is about about having a mindset of being a man. First of all, so you have to begin to see yourself as being strong and adventurous and a little bit aggressive. You know, that word has negative connotations these days, but you have to be aggressive. Straight up, you just have to be.
Yeah.
And then being unwavering, being a rock, being a foundation. So I would say the first step to that is actually to develop the mindset and really focus internally on what's going on in your own head and saying, when is self-doubt creeping in? When am I idolizing comfort over God's call on my life? Mm-hmm. You know, attacking those things mentally and in the subconscious and in the conscious realms. And then once you kind of have that mindset and that internal part locked away, then you can really express it to the rest of the world and work on things like, hey, I have a friend who, arbitrarily I'm speaking, I have a friend who I need to talk to, and it's going to be a challenging conversation because maybe it's about a sin issue or something like that, and they're not going to like hearing it. Once you have the mindset locked down, you will then have the courage and the ability to have those kind of conversations. And you can then work on conflicts and conflict resolution, and you can work on being less agreeable sometimes and maybe even voicing your own opinion and saying, hey, I disagree with this, you know, when you're just in casual conversation. And there's nothing wrong with being less agreeable. So, you know, I'd say focus internally first and then move externally and look at, you know, just creating conflict every now and then if you need to, as long as it's in the right heart. And
it's
then
got to be directed toward love at the end of the day. It's got to be directed toward helping greater good and focused on love.
Yeah. And, you know, maybe create some conflict, and then you can go out and pursue the job that you want, pursue the ministry opportunities that you want, things like that.
Yeah. So for me, you know, again, going back to my early 20s, late teens, early 20s, man, this sounds so weird to say, but I didn't feel like I was a man. It's because I didn't have the mindset right.
Yeah.
You know, like, I mean, I drove a cool car. I did all kinds of fun stuff. But like, if you really ask me at my core, like, did I feel like a man? The answer was no. And it wasn't until I started intentionally developing that. And I developed it by actually reading the Bible. Like, I read the life of, like, two of my favorite people mentioned the Bible are King David and Jesus. And I think most people probably agree with that. But I read those two guys' lives. Those dudes were men. Like, they were manly, they were men. And I started developing that mindset, like, okay, I'm called to be like this. And on the outside, like, what that started looking like for me, and I knew this. I even wrote it down. I still have it written down on a piece of paper today. It just says, be bold.
Yeah.
So I tend to be a little bit more passive. Like, I'm not like a guy looking for arguments and stuff. But I'll tell you what, since I wrote down, like, be bold, and I was looking at, like, the life of Jesus and David, and they just went after these, like, some stuff that I'd probably be like, I don't really want to get into that conversation or all that. Yeah. They attacked it head on, man. And that, to me, that's part of what being a man is. Yeah. So I wrote, like, I have that written down still this day. It's not something I necessarily struggle with anymore, but, like, be bold. And I remind myself, like, Alex, that means when you want promotion at work, don't just sit down and don't mention it. Like, get out there and mention it. When someone's doing something that is, that's a Christian, that is claiming the name of Jesus and doing something clearly wrong, be bold. Go out there and tell them, hey, we got to change this, man. Like, let me help you. That type of thing. Like, I got to go out there and not be passive. And so it started, like you said, it started with a mindset that I got from the Word of God. And externally, I started putting some things into practice, like being bold, that really kind of shaped me as a man almost. Like, where I am today, I can relate back to that mindset originally. So I'm on board with what you're saying, man. I think you're exactly right.
To give an example of that mindset, something just came to mind. I had a family member who was stuck in a sin. And this family member had actually been so deceived, and I'm talking a blatantly obvious sin. Like, any Christian would agree that this is a sin. Right. Or a sin pattern, really. And this family member had been so deceived that she did not even think it was a sin. Because, just some weird stuff going on. So I confronted this family member, and I knew beforehand that, hey, this is not going to end well. It's going to end in this person getting upset, and it's going to end in probably her trying to fight me, So at the end of the day, I had to say, hey, I understand what's going to happen, but this is a potentially spirit-killing thing in her life. If you allow sin to come into your life and then you allow yourself to be deceived, it's only a few more steps to doing a lot worse. Right. So I decided, hey, I have to cut this off right now where it's at. And sure enough, so I gently confronted this family member, and she, like I predicted, it blew up into not a big argument, but she got very upset. But at the end of the day, I had to walk away from it and say, hey, I know I did the right thing here. I know I honored God with what I did. And then sure enough, a week later, she came back and thanked me for saying what I said. Yeah, that's cool. Part of it was, I didn't argue with her. I actually just stood firm on what I said because I knew I was doing the right thing, had the right mindset. And then when she tried to argue, I just refused to argue with her and stood on what I said. Yeah. So, I think that's part of having that mindset. It can having the difficult conversations that need to be had. Right. So we're developing that mindset. Where would you recommend somebody start? Yeah, that's a good question. I think one of the first things that you can do, and this is going to sound maybe a little bit superficial or strange to somebody that's not a Christian, is start working out if you're not already. I'm a big proponent of working out. Alex and I have talked about this a lot, but it instills discipline, and you really need a disciplined mindset if you are going to make any changes in your life at all. You have to have discipline. So the first thing I would say, ironically enough, is start working out. It's going to instill discipline in you. It's going to make you feel more confident because you're going to see your body start changing. And then also, once those things will spill over and give you the confidence to start making changes in your life and attacking the thought patterns. So the first thing I would do is start working out. And then start being very honest with yourself about how you act. So, don't comfort yourself. If, for example, if you feel convicted by something like, hey, I should have said something to this person or in this conversation. Let's say for the sake of example, you're at work and people are bad-mouthing Jesus and God, and you're in the break room and you decide to stay silent and you walk away. Sometimes we can rationalize it and say, well, I wouldn't have gotten anywhere anyways, that I did the right thing. But you kind of have to begin attacking those thought patterns because, quite frankly, they're usually not correct. Right. And then start analyzing those things and saying, hey, I noticed I just kind of backed down because I didn't want to be ostracized from the group. I didn't want to be disagreeable in that moment. So I just I just sat there and laughed, or maybe I walked out of the break room. Instead, start analyzing those things, start noticing that you do those things to begin with, and then start attacking those thought patterns, and then start building up the confidence to say, to go in there and say, hey, I don't think this is right, guys. And then, obviously be spirit-led and have these conversations of standing up for what you believe in, whatever it is. That's good, man. I got one thing I want to add to that, and those are all really good points. As I mentioned, the Bible for me was a huge standpoint of defining what it looked, manliness, and masculinity looked like to me. But one other thing that I think back to is if you go back to the beginning of the Bible, Genesis, you get back to the very beginning, the very first thing God says to Adam
is not what most people would think. Most people are like, oh, well, there was the 10 Commandments, or there was his wife, there was this, there was that. The very first thing God said to him, he said, now name the animals and take care of this place.
Yeah.
So he gave him a job and responsibility.
That's
he
good.
said, this is yours, do it. Mm-hmm. And I think that for us as men, whether you're a student, whether you have like a part-time job, a full-time job, whatever it is, take responsibility of whatever you're doing.
Yeah.
And get yourself a project. If you got all this extra time, don't just use it to watch TV or to just make excuses for why you're not doing more. Do some sort of project. Do something that is like yours, that you take responsibility of. Because that, at the end of the day, that's what God called men to do. That's the very first thing he called us to do. Before he had a rule, before he had anything, he said, get your butt to work.
Yeah.
And I think that's a huge thing. Like, and that develops right there. For me, it develops a huge mindset. It's just taking that initial responsibility and getting to work. Yeah.
I think, all men should be working on something, whatever it is.
Yeah.
If you're in school full time, that's fine. If you're legitimately putting in 40 hours a week or more, that's totally fine to just be in school full time. But you need to have a purpose and you need to have a vision toward what you're going, or toward where you're going. That's a good point. I like that.
Yeah.
Having a vision, and then more mid game, I would add to that as well. I just completely lost my train of thought. But I would say more mid-game, also challenge yourself in, say you're a guy who has a job and you're involved in church and you're just kind of looking to discover more of your masculine spirit, and you know that you're not there yet, you're not where you want to be. I would encourage you to push yourself out of your comfort zone and do that as much as you can. Yeah. So I think that would be even the next step beyond a job. So I'm agreeing with what you're saying, and like let's move toward the mid game and end game.
You're trying to one up me. I hear you.
No.
I know. I'm just kidding.
I realized while you were talking, we didn't even go through mid game and end game. I was just talking about the beginner stuff.
Yeah.
But like, what about your guy who's in the middle already and he's already working his way there?
Yeah.
Because you have a lot of guys that maybe didn't grow up with dads who were involved in their lives, or maybe they were never initiated into manhood and some other things like that. So I'm kind of wanting to transition even now into, maybe you're a guy who already does have a job and you got your ducks in a row, but you never felt like you were initiated into manhood. I would say part of that initiation is pushing yourself out of your comfort zone. Mm-hmm. Do whatever you can to do that. If your goal, maybe you really, as an example, the Appalachian Trail, maybe you've got a goal where you really want to hike it. So start working toward that. Set a goal. Say, hey, next year, by this time next year, I want to do a few days on the Appalachian Trail. And I promise you, that will challenge you to your core, to do that. But set a goal and start working toward that goal. And then by this time next year, you'll be 3 days into the Appalachian Trail. You haven't showered. You stink really bad. Your whole body hurts, but you've now accomplished something legitimately accomplished something. Yeah. I will tell you, for me, I feel confident and comfortable in who I am as a man, but that was a very rewarding experience for me. Yeah. To go up and down those mountains and then say, hey, I don't need comfort. I don't need all the things that society has to offer. I can go filter my own water, get my own food, harvest it if I need to. I don't need, ironically enough, showers.
You probably did.
I did.
Told you.
I did. Well, I did need a shower, but everyone else stunk just as bad as I did.
Yeah, it's acceptable there.
Yeah.
You just have, when he came back,
I'm pretty sure that my stench could have killed a cat at that point.
Gosh.
Like it would have been bad. But we went 5 days without showering.
Wow.
So
it sounds kind of fun, actually.
Yeah.
You know what? I actually want to add a disclaimer here, like something for any women that are listening right now. Encourage your boyfriend, your husband, any guys to get out and do stuff like this.
Yes.
I'll tell you what, I know a lot of guys love them to death. If they're listening, I'm not talking about you. You get what I did there?
Yeah.
I'm not talking about them. I'm talking about somebody else. So,
yeah.
But I know a lot of guys, maybe, that when they want to get out and do something like that, their wives are like, well, I really need help at the house right now.
Yeah.
And I understand that as a woman, you may need, you may feel like you need help with that. I'm not, trying to turn that down at all. Like, there is a lot of work to do in the house, and keeping it moving, especially if you have a kid or something, is a lot of work.
Absolutely.
But getting your husband, your boyfriend, whatever it is, out and doing something that's very manly or something with other men like that is so refreshing. I guarantee you he'll come back ready to do even more at the house than ever before.
Oh, yeah.
Because you're getting him back in his element where like God made him to be, to do those things. And I'll tell you what, man, another shout out to my wife here. She's good about that. Like when a guy, like if you would have said, hey, Alex, you want to go? She'd been like, Alex, you should definitely go. Yeah. It's because she's actually seen the fruit of that. I'll come back and she's like, dang, this dude's like ready to help out. Like he's charged now, like ready to go. And sometimes I know some guys, again, like love them to death, but like I can tell that like their masculinity is under attack because they you just don't see it in them anymore. But you know, they have like a new kid or something like that, and they're just always at the house. They're helping, they're cooking, they're cleaning, they're doing all that. It's all good stuff. It's very helpful, but it's also important for a man to be back in his element, especially if that's like your background, where you came from. Like you've got to be able to encourage that. So ladies, for what that's worth, if you're listening right now, that's something that is really important for you to encourage. And again, my wife has made me a better man because she's encouraged me to do stuff like that. I do more of that stuff now than before I was married to her because she's pushed me to do more of that because she sees the benefit. So, you know,
to support that too, scientifically it's proven that a man's testosterone goes up when he's around other men in that kind of an environment, which is part of why you do see the man come back charged up and ready to go. You know, he's rested and he's now filled up his spirit with kind of this adventure. And also for those that don't know, testosterone for a man is like, gives us energy, gives us sex drive, wink, wink, women.
Come on, dude.
I'm probably not supposed to say these things on his podcast,
but
like,
probably not.
You know, whatever. So it gives them energy, sex drive, and all these other, it has a lot of benefits. It actually prevents us from getting sick. You know, it keeps us healthier overall.
Right.
Builds muscle mass even. So, you know, you'll benefit from encouraging your man to go out.
Yeah. You know, I don't want to change topics too early, but I'd like to talk about testosterone.
Okay.
Is that all right if we kind of jump around a little bit?
Yeah, we can do that.
All right. I know. So, by the way, anyone listening, we're not editing. This is like totally off script. We don't actually have a script. We just mentioned like 5 things we want to talk about before. But you mentioned testosterone, so now I'm wanting to get into that. I think it's a good segue away from maybe the mindsets to go with it and getting right into that. Like testosterone right now, you probably know more about this than I do, but I know that if you look at stats in the United States, it's at an all-time low, right?
It is, yeah. So there was a study that came out recently within the past few years, and it found that across the board in all age groups of men, testosterone levels have dropped 1% a year since 1987. That means that since 1987, we've seen a 30% decline in testosterone in men. That is a ton. It is, you cannot underestimate the level of importance that has. And that's why if you look at movies in the 80s versus movies today, you had Arnold Schwarzenegger running around a jungle with a machine gun in the 80s, and he was jacked with all of his jacked friends. He did have some steroids that helped, but
sure.
But that was kind of what men wanted to be back then. And now you look at it, and you've got, you know, men kind of want to be very effeminate. They want to just sit and drink. There's nothing wrong with drinking coffee, but they want to sit and drink coffee. And they have even more effeminate facial features these days as a result of testosterone declining.
Right.
So, you know, you hear oftentimes that women will say, I can't find a real man anymore. Well, a lot of it has to do with testosterone levels dropping.
Yeah.
You've got men who are walking around untreated. And it's actually to the effect now that back in the 80s, they considered 1,000 nanograms per deciliter to be a normal testosterone level. And now they've lowered it down to about 600 when you get tested.
It's considered normal now.
Yes.
Wow.
So they've even the American Medical Association has lowered their standards for what they expect as far as testosterone in a man to accommodate that, but nobody's talking about it. And nobody's seeing it as a problem. It's a very big problem. Oh,
I mean, it is. You see it at a cultural level, even.
Yeah.
And like, it's weird though because I feel like that's the way men were. Obviously, we were probably in general, give and take. We were healthier in the 80s. There was less junk food, all that. You know. We didn't know the stuff we know now, so you can be healthier now if you want to be. Back then, people were healthier. So testosterone in a man should probably still be at that same level, not dropped by 400 points. So, but it's almost as if I feel that society wants it to get even lower.
Yes.
Like, I mean, do you feel that same way, or is that just me? Like, I mean,
no, absolutely. It's easier to control men when they have lower testosterone.
Yeah, it's true.
You know, if you've got testosterone gives men, it'll give a man the courage to stand up and to be confrontational when he needs to be. It'll give them the courage to say, hey, I'm going to go against the flow when I need to. You know, maybe 10 of my family members or coworkers are thinking this one way, but I'm going to go against the flow. And it gives men the ability to fight when we need to.
Yeah.
You know, so if you have a bunch of men walking around with lower testosterone, they can be deceived more easily, and they are easier to subjugate. They're less willing to fight than a man with higher testosterone.
Yeah, it's crazy, man. And like going back, like, so culture, like men are, and this sounds bad, but I feel like men are almost looked at as like evil these days.
Yes.
Like a manly man is like a bad thing. Like it's not good for society. And, you know, and I know that maybe in today's world, women maybe feel like they've been a little bit mistreated, or it's a man's world, which I actually don't agree with, and I've had a firsthand experience with that. So again, I'm in corporate America. I got in corporate America at 18. When I was there at 18, my mindset was, this is a man's world. Like, I'm good to go. You know, I'm like, this is the man's world. It was mostly men. That isn't the case anymore. It hasn't been mostly men for a long time. I mean, people still make it sound like it's a man's world. It is not. And my firsthand experience with this was, I worked hard, man. Like my early 20s, as soon as I got like that mindset of being bold, like I got promoted quick. I worked really hard to get where I am today. So at one point, I was at this point I was like a manager of a few different departments, and I was having a problem with a certain employee. She was a sales rep, and she was supposed to be better than she was, and she knew it, and she was doing some things that were bad, and it was to the point where I was like, hey, I'm gonna have to get rid of her. So I went to HR and said, hey, I gotta get rid of her. And she's like, you have to be really careful. I'm like, why? And she goes, that is a woman. And I was like, okay. And she goes, the corporate America is a woman's world, not a man's world. This is corporate America. Like, this is a big public company. And the head of HR said this is a woman's world, not a man's world. Yeah. Shocked me. I'm like, what are you talking about? She goes, the government would rather you lose your job than her lose her job, because it's a woman's world. It's going to favor her even if she's 100% in the wrong. Yeah. And so she said, hey, you gotta approach this really carefully. Like, I need this, this, and this. And she goes, if it was a man, you could just fire him right now and it would be fine. No one would care. Yeah. But I was like, man, that's not okay. Like, so, you know, everyone kind of goes back to this thing of like, oh, it's a man's world. Like, we got to keep on like getting women up and empowered. And I'm all for that, but not at the expense of making it less about men, because you are killing testosterone by doing that. I mean, you're killing like what it is to be masculine by saying you're not as important as women anymore. Yeah. It's showing favoritism in a wrong way, man. And I think for me, from a culture level, it's hurt our company. And now we're probably thinking, all right, there he is, Alex is all sexist and things like that. So everyone knows my last 4 hires were female. One of them is a manager, and I absolutely love their performance.
Well, you know, one of the problems is, Alex, you can't even have an honest conversation these days about the differences in gender without being labeled as a sexist. And it's complete suppression of freedom of speech.
It is.
You have to be able to acknowledge the differences in the sexes, quite frankly. You know, women physiologically are not created to be weightlifters. You know, you're not going to have a woman being Arnold Schwarzenegger. Right. Likewise, men physiologically are not created to be caretakers. Not saying that you can't have women who are great weightlifters and men who are great caretakers, but generally speaking, statistically speaking, this does not happen. There's a reason why nursing schools, I forget the number, they're like 95% women. Yeah. And there's a reason why engineering schools are like 95% men, depending on where you go. Yeah. I think it's a little bit lower now. I don't want to throw out bad numbers, but we have physiological differences that we have to acknowledge. Yeah. So, you know, kind of playing off of what you were saying, there's a huge suppression of honest discussion these days, which goes against what we believe in fundamentally. We believe in free speech in this country, right? But you can't even have a conversation anymore. No. And really, it's what it is it's thought and voice suppression by certain groups in this nation. Yeah. But you do have to acknowledge that, and you have to acknowledge, you know, a lot of times they like to throw out, well, there's only 6 women who run the top 100 companies in the world, and then people say, oh, well, that must mean that we have a system that's unequal. Well, no, it's because women generally don't want to run these companies. Oh, yeah. And the fact of the matter is, these guys that run these companies work 120 hours a week, and they barely sleep, and they don't spend time with their families. What we really need to be asking is, why do these guys want to run these companies? Because I tell you, the reward is not worth what these guys go through. No, man. I mean, it's a brutal, stressful life, and you cannot have a social life. You cannot have a family. You cannot have all these things. And rather than asking ourselves, you know, why would these guys want to do it? And then why do women not want these positions? Because let's be honest, a lot of women want families. It's a very good, healthy desire. Absolutely. And they want husbands, and they want to be social. We're not asking ourselves, you know, why women don't want these positions. Yeah. We assume that it must be, you know, the patriarchy and men being evil.
Yeah. So, all right. So testosterone's low. Culture is against it.
Let's talk about what we can do to fix low testosterone.
That's what I want to talk about.
Okay,
cool.
That's
where I was going with it. Yeah.
Sorry, I thought you were moving to.
Oh no,
thing.
I'm not moving on. Yeah.
Okay.
But I want to what can we do? I mean, everything's against us.
Yeah. So you can actually go to your doctor and request a testosterone check, and for most people with health insurance, it'll be free. So that's the first step.
So that's just going to tell you where you're at, basically, on that spectrum. Okay.
Yeah. You'll get a test. And I talked to my doctor about it because I wanted to know what mine was, and he's like, sure, I can write it up, no big deal. But he said that he gets a lot of patients who come in who are feeling depressed, lethargic, they have trouble waking up in the morning, low sex drive, all these different things. And he's like, oftentimes people want to treat him for depression, but he finds that overwhelmingly it's low testosterone.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So if you're feeling those symptoms, then absolutely go have it checked. And even if you're not, even if you feel great, go have it checked to give yourself a baseline. Because maybe later on in life you'll have some effects. But you can go have it checked, and then you'll get the readout. And if you're normal, then you've got a baseline. If you're low, you can actually have it synthetically treated. But there are also, I prefer the natural remedy and treatments.
100% natural, man.
Yeah. So if you can get it fixed holistically, that's a better option. And some examples of holistic treatments would be, like we said earlier, exercising. Cannot stress the importance of exercising for a man. It instills discipline, but also it's going to increase your testosterone. Scientifically.
Squatting alone is the biggest testosterone boost that you can get from a workout. It does something in the male body.
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just about to say compound lifts are the best thing that a man can do. And if you think about it, back in the 80s, most people were doing manual physical labor, which is compound movements at its core in farm work. There is a correlation there between, the amount of exercise that we got back then versus today.
Yeah.
But squatting is by far the best that I've seen. Deadlifting, bench press, overhead press, and then bent over barbell row.
Yeah.
Get a plan, start hitting the gym, lift some weights. Your testosterone will go up. It's a fact, Yeah. And the heavier you lift, a lot of times, the more testosterone you can get. Start eating clean, eat naturally. They've actually shown that, so a lot of our processed foods these days have soy in it.
Right.
They pump soy in from China. It's cheap and it's a great filler. They throw it in burgers, for example, to add weight, and then it's a lot cheaper than beef.
Yeah.
But the downside is soy is actually a testosterone. It increases your estrogen.
Estrogen, yep.
So when you have an increase in estrogen, basically you want more free testosterone, which is the difference between your testosterone and your estrogen level.
Right.
So if you're increasing your estrogen level, then you have less free testosterone and you act more feminine.
My performance in the gym actually improved when I cut soy out. I got soy protein. And I was like, you know what? Someone's like, it increases estrogen. I'm like, what? I cut it all out. I'm like, dang, my max reps went up. Without really changing anything other than just cutting out soy is interesting.
Yeah.
But that's something that, and that's on every label. If you're a guy and you're like, I want to increase testosterone, make sure, just look at it. If it says soy in it, just avoid it. Yeah. Or, in moderation. You're never going to
avoid soy, anything processed, in my opinion. This, I don't know. Some of y'all probably aren't willing to go this far, but I've completely cut bread out of my diet. Because,
dang, that's extreme, man.
Yeah, I know, because you can't everywhere. There's sandwich places everywhere, but you cut bread out. That's again a processed food, and there are studies coming out now that show that bread poisons your body literally. And that's disgusting. They're starting to think that these processed wheat based foods are the cause for heart disease, because what they're finding is that it inflames your body and can cause your arteries to constrict. So I've cut out all breads, all processed meats, things like that. They're no good. Eat more nuts. Eat fatty. That's another thing. Eat fatty foods. Fatty foods are really good for you, especially with the good types of fats in them. So eggs. I eat eggs just about every morning for breakfast, and those increase your testosterone. Yeah. Eat nuts. Eat nuts for snacks, Don't be afraid of eating, some beef that's got some fat on it, like a steak or whatever, because it's actually good for you, and it will increase your testosterone.
Good.
Also, take a daily multivitamin. That'll be huge.
Yeah.
There's
so many good options for that now. There's a lot of good organic options. You get it off Amazon and stuff these days. So.
Yeah. Absolutely.
It's not like it used to be where you had to go to some specialty place to find those things. You can get them anywhere. So
absolutely, yeah.
I got another one I want to add to that. That I know is a really good one, and we kind of touched on it a little bit earlier. But getting around other men.
Yes.
Men being around men boosts confidence. It boosts it's good for you across the board. Testosterone increases, all that. It's so good for you.
Yeah.
And, you know, this kind of jumps back into culture, but, like, they just got rid of the Boy Scouts in the United States.
Yeah.
Now it's just the Scouts. And we called it I forgot what it was called. Everyone was praising it because it was like a huge move for equality or something like that.
Yeah.
But honestly, it's not, okay, I'm all about like boys and girls being together. Maybe add something else for that.
Yeah.
But boys getting around other boys, they're going to have, especially like when you're in that developmental stage,
Yeah.
they're not going to talk about the same things now if there's a girl around. They're just not going to, because their mind, that's mysterious. So now they're like got their guard up.
Yeah.
But you get boys around other boys, they can just be boys.
Yeah.
And I was a Boy Scout growing up for a little, like I didn't make it all the way through, but I was one for a little bit, and it helped me a lot because I was able to like connect with just other guys in a room.
Yeah.
You always left pumped. You know, if there was one, I was scared of girls when I was a kid, man. So if there was one girl in that room, I would not have had any of the same experiences.
No.
And so, like, sure, equality. Now we're all being, you know, now we can have girls in the Scouts. Like, that's fine. But, like, you just took away one of the few things that boys had to be a boy by themselves.
Yeah.
And just taking that's, again, getting rid of that manly interaction, that's going to hurt testosterone at a very young age now.
Yeah. And, you know, it's funny because we encourage girls to go out and have girls' activities.
Right.
But now we're saying men shouldn't have men's activities, which is kind of idiotic in my opinion as well.
Yeah.
But like you said, men joke a different way when we're around other men.
Absolutely.
You know, we can be a little bit more free. And it's, you know, we have to be that way. We can't always joke and talk about the things that we want to around women, and it can be to protect them in some ways, you know. And we can't have honest conversations about the world because women can be a little bit more innocent than men. And that's a good thing. That's a feminine trait. But, you know, men can sometimes have to fight or confront things in the world that are a little bit more harsh.
Right.
And it can be good to be able to talk about those things amongst other men in addition to the joking that we have, you know.
Yeah.
And then, you know, you can talk about different things or encourage each other in those situations as well.
Yeah.
I mean, shoot, when I go out into the woods with guys like hunting or backpacking or whatever, that's when we have honest conversation. You know, hey, how are you doing spiritually? How are you doing with this? How are you doing with that? Well, that's when guys will open up and say, hey, you know, I'm struggling at home, or I'm struggling in my faith, or I'm struggling in this, is in those environments with other men doing an activity. Yeah. That's when honest conversation happens.
Yeah. I just had, yesterday actually, two days ago, I sat down with a buddy, and it was with a group of people. Everyone had to leave. So he and I were just sitting by a pool, and we talked for like 2 hours, just me and him.
Dang.
And we had some great conversation that if our wives were there, we would not have had.
Right.
Nothing against them at all. It still would have been a great time, but the topics we got into, you would not get into.
Right.
Not even, doesn't matter if it's your wife, just with, you know, male and female in the same room, like you just wouldn't get into it.
Right.
So, I mean, I left there feeling energized and charged, because I was like, man, that's like, felt like a man, you know? I left there, I'm like, man, I just had a good, like, bro conversation, and, like, walked out of there. I felt a good, like, natural boost, you know?
Yeah.
So that's another one that I think that, going back to testosterone, that's a good way to increase it right there. So,
Bro conversations,
that's where it's at, man. So where are we going from here, man? A little bit more on culture? What do you think?
Yeah, we can talk about culture a little bit. You want to start out?
Yeah, man. I mean, I know I already mentioned some of it. Like I mentioned from a corporate America level, like it's not what people think from the outside or what the public wants you to believe that it's all for men.
Yeah.
But in general, man, I see it attacking, going back to like a younger age. I believe that men are under attack in this nation like never before. And if you're a Christian listening to this, you'll understand this part. If you're not, kind of stick with me. I honestly believe it's attack from Satan, from the devil. It really is that we're trying to attack men at a very young age. Perfect example of this is Star Wars. Don't get offended. I love Star Wars. I grew up with Star Wars. I'll be real. When my dad introduced me to A New Hope, Episode 4, when I was a kid, my life was changed, man. Like, my imagination like went wild from there. Like, honestly, I owe a lot of where I am today from my dad to introduce me to that. Like, my world blew up. Like, it was totally different after that. I loved it, man. I loved the heroes in it, all that. The latest Star Wars movie, it wasn't a good movie, first off, but if you go back and you sit down...
Understatement of the century.
Right? Okay. But if you sit down and look at the character development, what they did with the characters, and I always do this in all movies, I like to sit back and look at the big thing. The image they try to portray is men are reckless and evil, and if they're not controlled by a woman, they're going to make mistakes.
Yeah.
if you watch it now, people want to be like, oh, that's so extreme, Alex.
Oh, it was all over that
Watch
movie.
it again. Watch it one more time with that mindset. You will notice that men were not allowed to do a single thing in it.
Yeah.
Now, if that was the movie I first watched as a 4 or 5-year-old kid, when my dad showed me Star Wars, who would my heroes be? Some pink-haired lady that was in it?
Yeah.
Or like, what would my hero be? Like, I wanted to be Luke Skywalker. You know, like I wanted to be Han Solo because they were heroes. They were men. But now we don't have that anymore.
Yeah.
You still, and like, you know, and women, they had something too. Princess Leia was a star, dude. She was cool, but that was like for women. So like, it was really cool to see that. But now I look at it, I'm like, if I'm a young boy today, if I'm 5 years old, what do I have to grab onto other than, okay, I just need a woman to like keep me in check so I can like help her and do all that. Like, that hurts men and masculinity in general, man. That's like a super practical example. I'm sure you have more, but that's what I saw on just like a modern day culture level.
I want to say this first. You know, you hear women oftentimes, or not oftentimes, you hear some women that complain because they feel like a babysitter for their husbands.
Yeah.
And then, you know, they wonder why in our post-feminist society that they feel this way. But you look at movies like that where men are told to be the babies and then they need a woman to take care of them. And it ingrains itself subconsciously into our minds from an early age. They've actually done studies on movies and television. And when I'm sitting here talking with Alex, I am subconsciously filtering and deciding if I want to believe him or not. I'm going to look at his appearance. I'm going to say, does he look like a guy that I can trust? I'm going to listen to what he says and ask myself, do I agree with him? But when you watch a movie or television, that part of your brain actually shuts off. So you no longer have a filter. So when you're watching a movie like that, you are subconsciously accepting all of that information, unless you're consciously thinking and saying, "No, I disagree with this. This is crap."
Right.
But that's the power of that kind of stuff, and that's why companies like, you know, corporations will pay hundreds of millions of dollars for advertising. They'll pay $5 million for a 30-second clip during the Super Bowl because they know that they will subconsciously be planting a message in your mind, in the minds of 300 million people. Yeah. You can probably think of some commercials that you saw from the Super Bowl last year as an example of that. So there's a lot of power in movies and television shows, and that's why they are attacking those things, and that's why the enemy goes after these things, because he knows that he can attack people in that way. Yeah. And also, to talk about, you know, men being attacked early on, if you look at the Old Testament as well as the New Testament, there are two examples that I can think of off the top of my head where the enemy just wiped out an entire generation of young men. You look at Jesus, when Jesus was born, they were so worried about the Messiah coming that they just wiped out, they killed all of the male children. Right. And then I think it was Abraham, wasn't it? Was it Abraham? Or Moses?
No, it was Moses.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So in Egypt, they wiped out an entire generation of young men. Right. The enemy goes after men while they are young because men are, I don't want to say this to say that women can affect change, but men are the ones who really drive change, and they are the ones who can fight the battles of change and also resist oppressive forces. Yeah. That's why the enemy goes after men. Yeah. So I wanted to put that out there to give an idea of the seriousness of the attacks that come against men. And also, if you're a woman listening to the podcast, to understand that your husband is being attacked in these ways as well. Yeah. Because the enemy does not want a strong man who's firm in his convictions. Yeah. He will do whatever he can to attack a man. Yeah. And I mean, so society like attacks this in a big way. Like, generations of men are not getting wiped out in America, obviously. I mean, I feel like if the devil had his way, he would probably do it. So they are.
Yeah.
Abortion.
True. Yeah. I mean,
men and women, but yeah.
No, yeah, that's a whole other topic. It's just terrible. But just think about, like, I know in a different way men are being attacked. Yeah, it's not necessarily in a way that many of us even know. I mean, I bet a lot of people listening to this have never thought about a lot of what we're saying right now. Yeah, and ever since you and I had our first conversation about talking about this topic, like, my eyes have been opened. Like, I've noticed everywhere. Yeah, like more and more. And so, like, from a culture level as well, like politically, man, it's a mess, dude. Like, we got, you know, President Trump was elected and immediately went straight to, like, oh, we have a man president. He's sexist. He's this. He's that. He's this. That. You know, I took a little time. Like, I've always been a Trump fan because I'm in real estate. I love real estate. He's like the godfather of it. Like, I mean, he obviously he gets it. But if you look at his organization, everyone who's calling him sexist doesn't know anything about his business. It's primarily Like I think his staff is over 60%. I'm not sure the exact percentage, but I know it's more than 50% women. Yeah. And most of the executives are women. Yeah. And those women aren't like, oh wow, he's a super sexist, I hate him. Like they work for him because he's probably a great guy to work for. Yeah. And he's super successful. But we just jump straight to that. So from like a political level, like it almost makes me as a man feel like if I say something like I'm going to get in trouble or someone's going to get offended or upset, you know, like it's going to hurt someone's feelings if I say what I really believe, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's the left's greatest tool right now is they go for voice suppression and thought suppression. Yeah. As a man, you are not allowed to even speak common sense. Like, good Lord, there's two genders. You know, there are two genders. Okay, right. This is common sense. You don't have to look any further than a baby when it comes to the world. It has one of two body parts. Yep. Sometimes there can be some genetic things that go on there and some other things there, but generally speaking, there are two body parts. Yep. This is the laws of nature dictate this. Like this is common sense, and yet we've actually gotten so convoluted, and then had common sense and freedom of speech so suppressed that people are afraid to speak out against this. You know, and then they've also built up the worst thing that can happen to a millennial is they get offended. It's like, good Lord. Right. If I get offended, you're just a terrible person if you offend me. It's not because I'm actually deeply insecure and deeply emotionally unstable. It's actually just because you're the bad guy and you've offended me and hurt my feelings now. I hate to say it, part of growing up and being mature is being able to be offended or maybe have people say hard things to you and not getting upset. Yeah. That's, you know, back in 30 years ago, this would have been a commonly known truth that chances are if you're getting offended at everything, it's because you've got issues. Like,
yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely.
This was common sense back in the day. Now it's
not even that long ago, man. Like when I was growing up, like, you know, people didn't cater to people's offenses. Like, even when I was like in high school, if I got offended at something, which I've never been like, I've always understood, like take it as a learning, you know, example or difference in opinions. Like you have to love that, but people in today's world don't. But I can remember like, if ever something offended me, people were like, I don't care. Like, so what? You're offended. Like, get over it. Yeah. You know, but now, like, you offend me, you're like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. You know, like, I can't believe I offended you. But, like, I mean, it's an emotional response is what it is. And, like, if you can't control your emotions and getting offended to everything people say, like, you're the one with the problem. Yeah. Like, that right there, that just offended somebody. For sure. Someone just got offended, like, you're saying that I'm in control of my own reaction? And yes, you 100% are. If you get offended by everything or by things that you've been taught through political agendas to agree with, if you're getting offended at them, that's on you. That's your own mindset. That's your own issue. Yeah. And, man, I've offended a lot of people, especially in the last few years since it's become a bigger thing. Like, getting offended is cool for some reason, you know? Like, but, I mean, for me as a man, it is suppressing, especially if you're somebody, again, like me in my younger years where I wasn't as confrontational as I am now. That would have been hard. Like, you don't want to offend people, so you just get quiet and you just suppress, and your testosterone drops. The next thing you know, you're
it may not literally drop from that one thing.
You know what I mean? But like, I know what you mean. Over time, like that suppressing of who you really are is going to negatively affect you. Over time,
you can't have a masculine mindset.
Yeah, you just turn into a mold of what the world wants you to be today, and that's a dangerous place to slip into. Obviously, I know I just had super fast forward. You're right, but that over years, that's what that will lead to.
Yeah, and you know there was a study that I was reading recently that they have a term in psychology called agreeableness. And agreeableness is a measure of essentially how agreeable you are. So if Alex and I are talking and there's something that I disagree with that Alex says to me, if I was highly agreeable, I would laugh at it and let it go. But if I'm disagreeable in this measure, then I would say, hey, Alex, no, I actually think that this is the case and here's why. So that's what agreeableness. Now, or what agreeableness is. So now that we've established that, agreeableness is directly tied with masculinity. Lack of agreeableness is directly tied with masculinity. So women are statistically more agreeable, much more agreeable, it's not even close, than men. And they've linked that having a lack of agreeableness is an indicator of success overall in life. It is a indicator of being a leader in whatever capacity you work in. And it is also a indicator of being more attractive to women. Women want a man who is less agreeable, and this is statistically proven. So if you're a guy out there, like we talked about earlier, agreeableness and being willing to have conflict and things like that, obviously you can't go around offending everybody and telling everybody that they're wrong all the time and upsetting people. But having a capacity to disagree is a very important thing. And statistically speaking, we just know this because we look at the Bible and we see men who are disagreeable in the Bible.
Oh, yeah.
King David wanted to marry Saul's daughter, and he went and killed 100 Philistines and cut off their,
right.
their hoo-hoos, and he got his wife.
Right.
He wasn't a very agreeable man,
Yeah.
So we know this intuitively from the Bible, but also modern secular statistics are showing this as well.
Yeah. Yeah, it really is pretty intense, man. That's a lot. That's like an overwhelming conversation we just had.
Yeah.
What can we do about it? I know, I want this to be actionable. How are we helping somebody who's listening right now?
Yeah.
What do we do?
I think as Christians, so I want to come at this from a Christian viewpoint. I hate to say it, but in my opinion, Christians are actually the worst at promoting masculinity. I go to a lot of churches and I see a culture of the church very much accommodating to women, but B, the church telling men you're wrong for being a man.
Right.
And this is about to, again, we're just going to offend everybody tonight at some point.
Hey, that was the goal,
but,
right? No one said? No, I'm just kidding.
We're being disagreeable right now.
Yeah.
No, but you look at the church, and the church tells the man, you need to sit still, which most men will agree with this, whether or not they'll openly agree with it or not. It's hard to sit still for guys. We don't really want to sit still.
Right.
They'll tell you to sit still, be pleasant, never disagree, never assert yourself in anything. And you're kind of just expected to be like this pretty little lapdog for pious old church women, and I hate to say it, that's very much the culture now.
Yeah.
And you look at megachurch culture and, it can be even a little bit worse. You've got, in some instances, you see guys that really kind of dress like women there. We won't go super into that rabbit hole, but it can be part of the culture even.
Yeah.
And people will oftentimes look at I do a lot of ministry with law enforcement and soldiers. It tends to be kind of my ministry field right now, and I'll minister to these guys. And most of them don't feel comfortable going to church because A, the people in church can't relate to them. B, they are shunned. So law enforcement and military, you have to find a part of yourself that is a little bit, I don't want to say darker, but you confront the darkest things that the world has to offer.
Right.
So you tend to be more of an edgy guy.
Right.
And that is shunned in church.
Yeah.
That is absolutely shunned. People do not like guys like that. So, these guys are oftentimes very uncomfortable going to churches.
Yeah.
So getting back to our original point, I think the way that we fix this is, first of all, we have to lead the charge as Christians, and we have to say, hey, we're going to encourage guys to be guys again.
Yeah.
And another thing, man, at our church we went to, I used to go to the same church as Alex for 7 years. The pastors at the church oftentimes couldn't post pictures of themselves hunting because they would have 10 people jump in the comments and absolutely lambast these guys. How could you possibly kill one of God's animals? Well, if you've read the Bible, that's okay. First of all, but again, hunting is a masculine activity. You may not understand it, but you have to accept it.
Yep.
So, is in the church, we first of all need to change the culture there. And we need to say, hey, let's encourage our men to be men again. Let's say, hey, they can go hunting. It's not a big deal. As long as they're doing it ethically, it's a good thing. Start off with that. Let's start off with changing the churches. Let's start off with being unashamed and saying what we need to do here. And then encouraging our young men to come into our churches and give them rites of initiation into manhood. Let's start doing retreats again and all these other things. Once we have the church kind of on board with us, then we can start moving into culture. And we need to start celebrating Christians who don't go into full-time ministry, vocational ministry.
Yeah.
There is a somewhat of a lack of celebration of men who choose to go into other fields.
Yeah, I agree.
If you have a young Christian man who decides he wants to join the military and serve our nation, a lot of people will kind of look down on that and look and say, well, why are you choosing to do that? Why would you want to do that? Well, the absolute fact is that that man might have more faith than you do, or he might have more faith than a lot of people who are in vocational ministry.
Right.
He's just got a calling on his life to be a warrior.
Right.
Or, maybe he's a professional athlete or whatever. So we need to send Christians out into the world again, be in the world but not of it. Send Christians into the world, start moving into these areas that are more secular, and then start infiltrating them, and start. People will see that we're different no matter what. They're going to look at a guy like Alex and say, Alex, you're very successful. You're obviously blessed, but you don't cuss. What do you have going on here?
Right.
And then that opens the door for more conversations.
Yeah.
And then ultimately the end game is we need to get back into the political realm. Let's be honest, most politicians are not Christians, even if they claim to be.
Right.
Move back into Hollywood and retaking Hollywood would be huge. And then also the schools, have more Christian educators.
I agree.
Encourage that kind of stuff,
Yeah.
We glorify full-time ministry so much that we oftentimes completely forget about people who are doing other things that are just as important.
Right. I think, so for me, it's to bring it very practical. I'll give both the professional world and the church world. Church world, for you and I, it was simple. So Stuart and I started a small groups ministry together for young adults. And he and I together started some of the most manly groups you can imagine.
Yeah.
He had a shooting group, but
Yeah.
it was a shooting group where they do a Devo. It was so sweet.
Yeah.
I did one that was, what was it, Bros, Burgers, in the Bible or something like that.
Yeah.
And we just went out,
that.
we went to a different burger joint every week, and we just rated it. We did a little ratings thing. We talked about one male character in the Bible. And those type of things, it's not as traditional as a normal small group. Oh, dude, here's one I just heard of. You guys ready for this one? Don't get offended, this one. There's a church in South Florida that will remain nameless. They started a Cigars in the Bible group.
Heck yes.
And they went to little cigar bars, and they started with just a couple guys. They ended up with 50 dudes every week showing up having cigars together.
If Alex smoked cigars, we'd be smoking one right now.
Nice. But that's a cool masculine thing to do. You bring it back into church world very easily.
Yeah.
A lot of military guys, if you're hey, you want to go talk about the Bible and have a cigar? They'd be like, yeah.
Yeah.
But if you're hey, you want to go to this service, and if they've seen what it looks like, you're right. Sometimes it doesn't cater to that type of people. I get that. So, and then from the actual business world, man, be an example. Don't suppress yourself. Don't be worried about offending people. At my work, the other day, someone was saying something that was just, to me, inappropriate. I was in the break room, used that example earlier, so I thought it was funny. I almost said this earlier, but I'm in there talking about something inappropriate. I'm like, guys. And they're look, I'm cut it out. Seriously. Talk about this when I'm not around. That was it. And they all just kind of oh, sorry, man, my bad. They were respectful about it. They weren't oh, how dare you, But they know that, dang, that's he is a Christian dude. He really stands for what he says. And now, these guys, they won't cuss around me. I haven't asked them not to cuss around me. I've never said that. They just know, this dude's a man. That's, what he does.
Yeah.
So start where you have, where you have influence. And then, that's where you begin retaking things the political realm or Hollywood, all those things. You start retaking those things by having your voice where you're at.
Yeah.
But I think in many ways, men, especially Christian men, have lost their voice outside of just the traditional, now I'm now calling it traditional, or the modern church.
Yeah.
And that's what we got to do, man. We got to go back out there with our voice. We've got to start taking these things practically. And I believe it's the only thing that's going to turn around this nation that we live in. The United States, man, I feel like we have a great president right now. I think he's doing a good job. But I still think we're heading in the wrong direction because men are not being men anymore. And especially, really, Christian men are not being men anymore. And that's we're called to be the head and to lead this thing, man. Yeah.
Interesting side note. I had a pastor come speak at my church, and he is on Donald Trump's spiritual advisory team.
Oh, okay.
And
nice.
He said that Trump called them in for a meeting one day and asked them to prepare some things that he could do better ahead of time. So this guy recounted that he was going into this meeting with Trump, and he's expecting for them to be lecturing Trump on the things that Trump needs to do better. And Trump gets in there and actually laid into them.
Oh, damn.
And laid into them in a good way, though. Trump basically said, hey, when I was coming up in the 80s, I was not right with God. I was messing around with women, doing all kinds of stuff. But I always looked at pastors, and they were very vocal back then. And they always were telling me the truth, and they were telling me what was right. I just chose not to listen to them at that time. He's like, I've met with a lot of you now, and I've noticed something in all of you. It's I've noticed that you're all afraid. And he's like, a lot of that is on us as politicians, and we've got now an environment in this nation that there is hostility towards Christians and social persecution towards Christians. I want to get this out here. Don't think that this isn't going to escalate more as time goes on.
Yeah.
We're being socially persecuted already. It will get worse unless we turn it around. But anyways, Trump said that, you guys are getting persecuted, and I'm going to change that. But he also said, I need you guys to do your end or fulfill your end of this bargain, and I need y'all to go out there and you need to be vocal and you need to start leading this nation again.
Wow.
Trump, according to this guy, is very much so a born-again Christian.
That's great.
Now, he's a baby Christian, and there's a lot of damage inside of him that he's having to work through and undo, and he's not going to be a super Christian overnight.
Yeah.
But make no mistake, the man prays for our nation a lot. He prays before every meeting, and he's got people ministering to him.
Yeah.
So there is hope in that.
Yeah, and I do think it's amazing that he pointed out to pastors to be vocal, to regain your voice, to speak up.
Yeah.
I think that kind of clarifies everything we just talked about. That's a really cool example. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
That's crazy, man. So where do we go from here? I think we're coming to the end of this conversation. What do you think?
Yeah. So kind of wrapping it all up, I think, let's take it from the beginning and say, hey, what have we talked about? If you're a guy that, maybe you're maybe you're a younger guy, let's say you're 16 or 17. Where do you start? You want to take this, Alex?
Yeah. I mean, first place to start is to begin developing the mindset of masculinity. I don't know what your background looks like. Maybe you don't have a father figure in your life. And I'm sorry to hear that. There are other things that you can do that'll help. There's a lot of great mentorship programs, even on YouTube. You can find stuff for free that is just a good manly advice. But start developing that mindset, figuring out who God made you to be, what kind of man He made you to be, where He wants you to go. You can start doing that at a very young age. Mm-hmm. And if you're not a Christian or listening to this, I encourage you, man. Like for me, true manhood, masculinity comes from Christianity.
Yeah.
So begin thinking about that as well, especially if you're a younger guy. But it's got to begin with that mindset that you got there.
Yeah. What about for the guy who's maybe in his 20s and he's grown up as a millennial, maybe didn't have a masculine father per se, wants to start walking down the road? What would you advise for him?
Man, get in the gym. What we talk about, get in the gym, eat healthy, be careful what you're doing with your life. Your body,
be disciplined.
Your body is a temple, and treat it really well. And then, yes, be disciplined. Take responsibility. Start putting things on yourself. Don't overwhelm yourself, but say, I'm going to be responsible. Something is going to be mine. Yeah. And start there, and then just be bold with it.
And, the example of the Appalachian Trail that I used, set a goal. Set a goal. Whatever you have in your heart, set a goal. Maybe it's you want to complete a Spartan race in a year, but you've never worked out before. Or maybe you don't work out a lot. Set a goal and start training toward that and have that. It'll build confidence. It'll build discipline in you. And the reward that you get from that emotionally and psychologically will be tremendous. Yeah. You will see yourself in a new light. Yeah. Yeah, so and kind of moving right along here now, thinking about culture in general, that type of thing. Be careful what you're watching, what you're listening to. Mm-hmm. The Bible talks a lot about, the Bible even says, if your eyes cause you to sin, gouge them out. Remove your ears if they're causing you to hear the whole thing. Be careful what you're inputting. I've always used this example. I look at the human body as a projector. It's only going to show what's being input. Be careful what you watch on TV. Be careful. Listen, the news is toxic. Listen to it to get what you need, but don't just sit around and listen to it all the time. Don't be discussing it, talking about it. You've got to be really, really careful with what culture's putting into you. For me, there's a lot of TV shows and movies people always recommend to me that I will never watch because I know it's going to be it's garbage that I'm going to be putting in. Be careful with that stuff. I think that's a big deal. Well, I want to say this. This would have been a good talking point earlier, so I'll go briefly. We won't get too much into it. I agree with you. I agree with that. But also don't be ignorant about the world and what is in the world and the evil that is in the world. Absolutely. I think that's a quintessential part of masculinity as well. And, again, this would have been a good talking point for earlier, but oftentimes Christians especially can bury their heads in the sand and be completely oblivious to what's out there. Oh, no, you got to know. Yeah. So likewise, we're not saying be ignorant because that's what it is. It's ignorance. You have to understand that there are pedophiles that live literally within a mile of where we're at right now.
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
pedophiles are everywhere. There are people who are going to stalk children everywhere. There are murderers everywhere. There are people who are capable of complete evil all around us.
Yeah.
And we have to be aware of that. So I kind of want to make this distinction, because oftentimes I think we get caught up in the, I need to isolate myself from the evil of the world.
Right.
But you have to be in the world, not of it.
Yep.
So definitely be careful what you watch. Don't watch things that cause you to sin, like, we're not saying that, but be aware of it. Be aware of the world. Kind of, I would challenge a lot of guys listening to this, because chances are you don't know really what goes on in a lot of the world. I've noticed that there are a lot of people that don't. And I'm walking through this season right now of even reading a very dark book intentionally, and it's a violent book. But what I'm trying to do is discover the depths of evil that people can have. And it's actually what it's doing for me is it's scaring me to the point of where I'm willing to act on the side of good, because I realize what can happen if people embrace fully the side of evil.
Right.
Anyways.
No, that's
good. We'll cut it off there.
Yeah,
I'm not going to go too far into that.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So testosterone, just cover on that real quick, a little
Yeah.
recap of it real quick. So from that level, like what are some practical things that we can do just to build that up again, like real quick?
Yeah.
Bullet points.
Workout, compound lift, for sure, compound lift. Cut out soy, cut out as much processed foods as you can. Eat nutritiously, eat your vegetables, eat whole grains. Try to get away from breads. Eat rice, eat beans, things like that. It actually tastes pretty good. Yeah.
And then
then multivitamin.
Yeah, multivitamin, yeah. And at kind of the end here, remember, you have a voice. No matter what the world's telling us right now, as men, we have a voice. We need to be able to share what's on our hearts. We need to be able to get around other men. We need to be able to have conversations that are sometimes difficult. We've got to be able to do all those things. It's so important.
Yeah.
So I hope anyone who's listening today really got a lot out of this. Stuart, you got anything else to add real quick?
No.
I'm actually what I want to do. So Stuart has a blog that's focused on men's ministry. You want to share us 2 seconds of that real quick, and then I'm gonna close this out.
Yeah, so I have a blog named Praetorian Blog, and it is very much so a men's ministry blog. We talk about some of the things that we've talked about today more in depth. I've gotten a lot of flack for some of the things that I've talked about on the blog.
Yeah.
But the objective of the blog is to speak truth, and we will speak truth, and that's just one of the core principles of it. So if you get a chance, praetorianblog.com.
Sweet. Awesome, man. Hey, I just kind of, we didn't plan any of this, and we literally aren't going to edit any of this. You're getting this raw from us.
Yeah.
But can you go ahead and I just feel like you're supposed to just pray for men in general right now, and let's just close out for that. But just go ahead and pray us out, man.
Father, I pray over this generation of men, especially the millennial generation and the generations coming up, God. I pray that you would give us a heart for passion, and I pray that you would give us a heart for standing up and fighting for what is good in this world, Lord. I pray that we would discover ourselves and discover what the desires that you've planted in our hearts are. I pray against the cultural influences and the cultural chains that are all around us that tell us to act and be a certain way, Lord. I pray that we would discover what you have called for us. Lord, I pray for any man that's trying to rediscover his masculine soul, and I pray that you would walk with him in that journey. I pray that he would have the strength to attack the thought patterns that might be attacking him, and that he would overcome those thought patterns and would be able to attack some of the, what's the word I'm looking for? He would be able to attack some of the more destructive ideologies that have been deeply planted into him. And Lord, I just pray for all men in this nation that we would be able to stand up and speak truth, that we would fight for what is right, whether it's physically or with words or spiritually. I pray for a generation of spiritual warriors that would go out and retake this nation and retake this world. And Lord, I just pray for health over all men out there. I pray that all men would see gains as they compound lift. And Lord, I just pray for the women out there. I pray for women to have also the strength and there's strength and humility, and I want y'all to know that. And I pray for women to have the strength to be humble and to encourage their men to be more masculine, and to encourage their men to do what God has planned for them. And men cannot do what we are called to do without strong women at our sides. So I pray over the women that are at our sides, and pray over all the families that of people who might be listening to this. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. This was fun, Stuart. Thanks for doing this, man. And thank
fun.
you, everybody, for listening. We're going to have some notes and stuff like that on this, so I really appreciate it. This was almost an hour and 20 minutes, but I think it was a great conversation. So thanks again, man. Thank you, everyone, for listening.